yesterday, I understood yesterday, we had 3 lectures, 2 by Professor Mazola, and finally there was a small presentation on the site that we are doing today, and what the site is, a brief explanation of the same, and what are we supposed to do on the site, what is exercise on. For the morning 2 lectures, Professor shared his experience, his projects. One was a very nice regeneration project that he is doing at Qatar, Doha, and where he showed his experiences with 4 neighborhoods and how he's tried to solve the issues. Doha is a very hot place, temperature going above 48 degrees, 50 degrees, and that was the issue, and why, and also those areas, many of the structures were abandoned, were not really being used. So he's trying to solve with his proposal the issues that the residents are facing and the pedestrian movement, and also trying to shade the areas so that the users can move around and attend to their requirements in a cool ambience. That was a very good proposal with him. He showed 4 of his neighborhoods, and then of course he also talked about how they have visited the Venice Charter once again and tried to discuss the issues and the understanding that was by the leaders in the last century, and how it does not really hold ground in certain places today, how it can be revisited and put forward in a way where we can, the whole idea of heritage conservation is, or for that matter urban conservation is, we're trying to conserve something which is significant for us and also for the coming generations. So if there's something which has been worked out in the last generation which has not really met the goal that it was put forward for, so of course it happens for all processes, it's always an evolving process, and now they have revisited the Venice Charter and they've tried to address the issue of restoration. So does it hold ground? If it holds ground, what is it that we're losing and what is it that we're gaining? So explained at length in the second lecture, and today he'll be talking of his experiences at Netherland. So we'll have a short presentation of 1 hour where he will share his Netherland experience, and then we'll move to the site. Okay? So welcome, Professor, once again.
We did with my third-year students on Notre Dame in 2007, when Rob Clear, the brother of Leon, unfortunately both died last year, invited me to solve a problem of this town in the Netherlands. As you know, the Netherlands is a very small country. It is a country that has been, let's say, artificially created, taking ground from the sea. So it's a place where the value of land is extremely, extremely high. It's impossible to waste land. So differently from what is happening all around the world for speculative reasons, they can't make a master plan where buildings are built and then left empty. They have a very sophisticated and very interesting system where a ministerial committee is analyzing every year the country to understand which are the depressed areas for economical reasons, obviously, and try to understand what is strictly necessary to change these places. No one little square meter of land could be waste. And this is something that is also making any kind of construction, let's say, profitable for those that are making investment, because it's not an investment made with a long-term program. It's something that has to be made because it's really necessary, so it's going to succeed. In any case, people are upset with a lot of horrible things that are happening, architecturally speaking, urbanistically speaking. So at the beginning of 2000, it was decided that the place in the Brabantine region, which is the borderline between the Netherlands and Germany, this land was exhausted. It was the place where they used to have the peaks of the Netherlands, for obviously for industrial production. But the land was so polluted by the products of these peaks for years and years that it was no longer possible to keep that that land in that condition. It was a pretty stinky place, and they decided to move in another place these animals and use this land for something that was necessary because of the migration and the growth of number of population around the region between Helmond and Eindhoven. Eindhoven is the place where the Philips factory stands, and so it's a very important industrial zone of the Netherlands. So they decided to increase the city of Helmond, building a new district, let's say new town, because when they are thinking in construction, obviously, they have to consider what does it mean build a city. A city is not possible to be conceived as just a residential blocks, but it's something that has to be completed with all the possible functions. So it's really the design of a small new town. The request of the inhabitants, nevertheless, was to have this new town that was like the old one. It was specifically required to have a traditional urbanism and architecture. So first they called the star architect, the local star architect, Rem Koolhaas. I don't know if I can pronounce this slogan, but I think sometimes it's necessary to be very clear and to be very honest with these mythological figures that are considered gods. But he became famous in the 80s because his slogan was "fuck the context." And this is absurd. How you can say that? How you can become famous for that? And indeed, thanks to his great respect of places, he made a proposal and it was kicked out by the inhabitants and said, this is a disgusting project, we don't want to have that. So they decided to ask another architect from Italy that was an emulator of Rem Koolhaas, and the project was another failure. Finally, they decided to go not that far and go to Germany, where Rob Krier used to have his firm, and they asked him, he was very famous already in the 70s, 80s because of his approach to traditional urbanism and architecture. He's one of the founders, let's say, of the so-called postmodernist movement. Probably was not the greatest classical traditional architect, but he did a spectacular works with his attempt of recreating something classical traditional. He made a master plan. The master plan was immediately approved by the population. They started the construction of the first buildings. The first building designed by Rob Krier with his son-in-law Christoph Kohl. And then some other projects were made by Mark and Nara Breitman, some classical traditional architects. But this project was also planned to develop local economy and not to colonize the Netherlands with the architects and firms coming from other countries. Also because the system, as I said, is very sophisticated, because this ministerial committee is identifying the places where to make this project, and then they develop the project, and then when the project is done, they invite all the firms that wants to invest on this construction. They break up the project in many different parts, and many different entrepreneurs are making their project with their architects. They started this, but then Rob Krier, but the population, more than Rob Krier, were desperate, because in the Netherlands, no one architect was able to do anything traditional. So they started making projects with weird postmodernist forms, with no idea of building techniques, with reinforced concrete, with the negation of static, a building that was presenting a kind of open corner without any support on it. And it was funny because when I was there with the students, some of the students decided to to go there and lift up one of his classmates to work as a caryatidist to support the building, and they took a picture. In any case, Rob called me and said, would you like to bring your student to make a demonstrative project to let these people understand what does it mean, classical, traditional urbanism, architecture, and building techniques. We will pay you the field trip, the journey, and you will make this project. I really, I like to make this kind of challenge, but also I like to allow the students to make a real project, because many times schools of architecture are teaching white elephants, while we need to teach them real stuff and understand the real life, the real practice of our profession. So the only thing I asked Rob was, okay, we will do that, but we can't limit the visit to Brandevoort to see what has been done till now. But we need to organize a small field trip, some small visit of the Brabantine region to document what is the local character, to make an abaco in order to understand how they can work to complete this town in the respect of the place. So this is the list of the students I brought there. And so I gave them a task. Obviously, this is similar to what we are asking you to do, but obviously don't think that you have to do all these things in such a short time, because in this case we had 3 days to make the tour of the Brabantine region, and we had 1 month and a half to design the 84 houses we were asked to do. But the way to organize this research, to organize this survey, it is based on the analysis of the place at the urban and architectural level. So this is the list of the documentation to be made, analyzing existing cities. By the way, I will share the PDF of this, so you will have this. But this is the system I brought to the University of Notre Dame when I was a high. One of the most important things to be done is to study the urban sequences. What does it mean? In a settlement, in a district, in a city, there are routes where people like to walk, where you can find activities. So we can consider the main urban sequences, which in the Western world, in Italy in particular, but in many parts of Europe, are those where the main street, the main stroll, it is flanked by a series of piazze and piazzette where people are gathering, and also where you can find the piazze, but also the shops and other activities. So it was asked to analyze the block size, the streets in terms of the hierarchy of streets and types of streets, pedestrian, vehicular, pedestrian, etc. The analysis of urban spaces, so the piazze, the piazzette, the larghi, the spaces for gathering people, the parks and the garden, the edges and the boundaries, because this is very important. When we make a project, and this is the great limit of a new urbanism approach, the great problem of new urbanism approach is this idea of what they call transects, which is something that in the US, where they don't have any tradition in urbanism, is the first attempt of making a regulation. But the system of the transect of the new urbanism consists in giving some kind of value to the building. So they define T1, T2, T3, T4, etc., which is something that refers to some very tall building in the downtown, the historical center, and something that is getting smaller and much more widespread, moving toward the countryside. But to me, this is exactly the invitation to the sprawl, because when you have some kind of building that is getting less and less dense, what you produce is some scattered city with no definition of the space. While what is extremely important in the design of urban spaces is first to design the edges. In this case, yesterday we were talking about the 10-minute walk, or let's say 15 minutes as now is trendy, which means that we need to define some maximum dimension that is a place, is a settlement that is provided with all the possible function to survive. And then you can have a wall, or you can have a park, you can have some edge that say, okay, this settlement ends up here, nearby it will be another one where this is happening, which means fundamental important as a first thing to be done when we make an urban design is to define the edge, the perimeter. Then it was also asked to make sketches to identify important views, especially on site. Well, obviously analyzing the city, we were trying to understand through the reading of the city how buildings sometimes are designed on purpose to frame a particular view. The real estate value of a building is not because of a bilateral symmetrical neoclassical facade, but is mainly based on what is the power, what is the value of a part of the building that because of a particular view has a higher value than another one that doesn't have that. And this means that when we make an architectural design, we need to conceive the project on site in order to understand how we can give a value to the project thanks to the way we are framing views or we are hiding views, because sometimes there are monstrosities that you don't want to see. So you have to understand how to define that. So this is something that has to be analyzed by the student in the very first phase of the analysis, and they have to make this analysis at the urban scale. We are using the word Nolly plan. Nolly was these surveyors of the 18th century who made the first fantastic map of Rome in 1748, which looks like a cadastre plan, but the great value of that plan is that the building, the plan looks like a kind of horizontal section of the city where the blocks are hatched, but the public spaces within the blocks are drawn, which means the main room, the public spaces within the private one are drawn. And this is something that is extremely powerful graphic representation to anchor the building to the public spaces in front. You can understand who owns the piazza, even if the piazza is not private. You can understand how the piazza, the public space, it is continuing into the building to welcome people into the building and to bring to a, probably eventually a courtyard inside. This graphic representation is extremely powerful and valuable, and it's something that even if it was conceived in Italy, it is valid all around the world. It's what we try to teach the student to do. When I will show you the project, not today, but when I will show you my project, we will talk about that much more in depth. Then it was required to make an analysis at the architectural scale. Someone wants to be a but now it's no longer a building. Giving some kind of value to the building, so they define T1, T2, T3, T4, etc., which is something that refers to some very tall building in the downtown historical center, and something that is getting smaller and much more widespread, moving toward the countryside. But to me, this is exactly the invitation to the sprawl, because when you have some kind of building that is getting less and less dense, what you produce is some scattered city with no definition of the space. While what is extremely important in the design of urban spaces is first to design the edges. In this case, yesterday we were talking about the 10-minute walk, or let's say 15 minutes as now is trendy, which means that we need to define some maximum dimension that is a place, is a settlement that is provided with all the possible function to survive. And then you can have a wall, or you can have a park, you can have some edge that say, okay, this settlement ends up here, nearby it will be another one where this is happening, which means fundamental important as a first thing to be done when we make an urban design is to define the edge, the perimeter. Then it was also asked to make sketches to identify important views, especially on site. Well, obviously analyzing the city, we were trying to understand through the reading of the city how buildings sometimes are designed on purpose to frame a particular view. The real estate value of a building is not because of a bilateral symmetrical neoclassical facade, but is mainly based on what is the power, what is the value of a part of the building that because of a particular view has a higher value than another one that doesn't have that. And this means that when we make an architectural design, we need to conceive the project on site in order to understand how we can give a value to the project thanks to the way we are framing views or we are hiding views, because sometimes there are monstrosities that you don't want to see. So you have to understand how to define that. So this is something that has to be analyzed by the student in the very first phase of the analysis, and they have to make this analysis at the urban scale. We are using the word Nolly plan. Nolly was these surveyors of the 18th century who made the first fantastic map of Rome in 1748, which looks like a cadastre plan, but the great value of that plan is that the building, the plan looks like a kind of horizontal section of the city where the blocks are hatched, but the public spaces within the blocks are drawn, which means the main room, the public spaces within the private one are drawn. And this is something that is extremely powerful graphic representation to anchor the building to the public spaces in front. You can understand who owns the piazza, even if the piazza is not private. You can understand how the piazza, the public space, it is continuing into the building to welcome people into the building and to bring to a, probably eventually a courtyard inside. This graphic representation is extremely powerful and valuable, and it's something that even if it was conceived in Italy, it is valid all around the world. It's what we try to teach the student to do. When I will show you the project, not today, but when I will show you my project, we will talk about that much more in depth. Then it was required to make an analysis at the architectural scale. Someone wants to be a leader. But now it's no longer a building. Recurring types. This is obviously important to understand what I was saying earlier about the hierarchy of building, and also what we were saying yesterday. Monumental building needs the fabric, and fabric needs the monumental building. Then which are the compositional elements of public building and which are those of private buildings? Obviously, a public building that are emerging from the fabric are much more, let's say, noble and refined. And so documenting the corner condition, the roof condition, the chimneys, the portal, the balcony, anything that is making the building special. And at the end, this allows students to understand how you can have exactly the same type, but according to the level of refinement, you can distinguish between some important building and some fabric. Obviously, it was also required to document public ornaments, fountains, statues, etc. Because when we design cities, generally the public spaces is left like a void. But that doesn't work. You need to have elements in the main piazza that are giving particular value and are also balancing the spaces. If something is too much concentrated on one side and needs to have something not that important in some other place to balance and create the proper composition. Then it was also asked to document the scale of details. This is probably something very close to part of what you are going to do today, because it was necessary to ask the materials, their assembly, and other details, how they were made the building walls, the plaster masonry, how are made the roof, the slope, the tiles, the eaves, the cornices, how are made the openings, windows, doors, storefronts, the full range of examples, how are made the city walls if are present, the fences, the balustrade, the paving, the colors, the chimney pots, the porticos, balcony, downspouts, etc. This is something that allowed to create a local dictionary of building, which doesn't mean to have one style. It's to document what is happening exactly there. When I travel with my students, for instance, the last field trip we have in Sicily, it's interesting for them to understand how within only one region, traveling from Palermo to Siracusa, to Noto, to Catania, they can see a region that is mainly talking the language of Baroque because of the Great Reconstruction after the earthquake of 1693. But it is incredible to see how it's possible, how easy it is to distinguish between the Barocco di Palermo and the Barocco of Siracusa and the Barocco of Catania, which are completely different. You can see, you can read the language of Baroque, but you can also read the slang of the place, which makes the local character. So, obviously, it was asked to make the analysis of the condition of the sites, because obviously it was necessary to understand exactly where they have to make the project. And as I told you, it was asked to document the views, mainly to understand what was possible to be framed, but the connection among the different streets, because a project cannot be made here without having any idea of what is happening really on site, because the risk is to have a UFO, beautiful or ugly, that is landing on a piece of land and doesn't have any kind of relationship with the context. So the analysis of this connection is fundamentally important, the edges, etc. At this point, we made this analysis, as I told you, of the place. We analyzed Brandevoort itself, obviously, for what was possible to be documented. We analyzed Eindhoven, which was the nearby town, but then we went to Thorn, Hilvarenbeck, and Huizenden, which are beautiful towns. And these are pages of the sketchbook of my students while we were walking. They were taking notes, they were making sketches. They were trying to understand what is the typical character of this place. In this case, these are buildings, the buildings that were worthy to be taken in consideration in Brandevoort. These were details to analyze the typical composition of the facade of the buildings. The same thing was made in Huizenden, and as you can see, these buildings of Brandevoort are very simplified if compared to the articulation of the facade typical of the Brabantine region, with this beautiful crenellation with the dormers, with the system of pulley, with the shape of the arches and cornices that are much more defined. But this is also a place where there is a great tradition of bricks, so we try to understand how some building is ennobled with a brick solution, with a particular shape of arches, a particular shape of the crenellation at the very top of the dormer. That's a twisted pilaster that is just an aesthetic gesture, it doesn't have any function. Here it's possible to see other solutions for the typical dormers. This is another analysis of many different kinds of crenellation of the main facade of these typical Dutch houses. It was made also a kind of catalog of brick finishing, windows, shop doors, archways, etc. Doors, both we analyzed the shop doors, but also very refined details of some special for public building. We analyze the chimneys, we analyze the pediment, we analyze the cornices, anything, and also we analyze the way the bricks can be used as a decorative element, simply rotating or working with bricks that are going in and out, creating shade and shadows on the facade, that at the end gives a kind of polychromy, and it's something that in terms of economy doesn't cost anything, because it's a very cheap material, and the beauty is simply made by the great work of the craftsmen that are inventing cornices, brackets, etc. So we analyze also the very humble facade you can see on the left side. We analyze the cornices and the way the facade could be organized. Notice also the way the bricks in that case are organized, arches. And obviously, as I said yesterday, the notes taken next to the drawing are extremely useful to remind something that, because the sketch is made quickly, probably is not defined very well. So the notes is always reminding something that you can refer. In order to be considering that we were running, in order to complete this presentation, I also included a series of pictures of these villages we visited in the Brabantine region to see what is the typical character of these buildings that were in any case well documented in the sketches. You have seen. And so you can see how you can have these polychromy made only of bricks and stone, or different kind of plaster, and also the use of iron. For instance, you can see, well, it's not that visible with this light, but the facade on the right side has also the head of the tie road, which are beautiful because they have this kind of floral motif that is giving a particular value. Also, the building on the left side there has the same character. And as you can see, there is a great variety in the way the facade are solved in this region. This was a quite interesting documentation that was also made with the sketches to show how you can turn the corner and you don't have a 90-degree corner. In that case, what was happening in Brandevoort before our proposal was that they were turning the corner, but the corner was really appearing as a fake because it was a vertical line that was making the wall on the left and the wall on the right independent one each other. Well, you need to make an indentation if you work with real bricks. If it is a fake veneer, obviously you can do that, but that is very sad and it doesn't make any quality to the building, and also gives some also risk of infiltration of water on the corner. So we documented this beautiful system to turn the corner in this particular kind of corner, or as you can see there, we documented also this cornice with this brick rotated 45 degrees. We were trying to give any possible information about a solution that are very easy to be done, and in the same time are cheap to be done, obviously, and are giving mobile character with the smallest possible effort. The variety of the solution of arches and cornices is basically immense. There is also the possibility to use colored tiles to give some additional polychromy. But as you can see, for instance, on this building, simply working with yellow and red brick, typical of the region, is possible to do this. So at that point, we went back to Rome, and in only 1 month, as I told you, we designed these 2 blocks. The darker one are those that were given to my students to be designed, the block 18 and the block 22. So the blocks were given, so it was not necessary to make any urban design. It was only asked to make an architectural design. At the urban scale, we simply gave suggestions for the internal treatment of the blocks in order to hide the cars, since they were not using these blocks for playground for children, but all the blocks were divided as a backyard of each house. We created a condition with a passage of cars through the blocks with a series of parking lots, one place per apartment, in order to have the complete pedestrian condition outside of the blocks, and have a private garden and don't see the cars, even if the cars are just below their houses. Another thing that was to be taken in consideration was that it was strictly necessary to have a mixed income. So this project brought also to the definition of apartment to be used as a social housing that were to be melted together with the other in order not to be recognizable, in order to give a much more sense of integration to these people. Obviously, these are the least profitable in terms of real estate, but at the end, this is something that is not felt as a problem. So this was a quick view of the block 18, and this was a quick view of the block 22. As you can see, one of the major intent was to avoid the monotony of the facade with the building all the same height, all the same solution, really like in the historical center where you have the juxtaposition of building one next to the other, creating a sense of unity but avoiding the sense of uniformity. These were a series of quick street elevations. You can also recognize the entrances through the blocks we mentioned. This was the internal elevation. These were views along the street. And by the way, the master plan, as I said, it was not to be done, but it was necessary to make some drawing for the master plan in any case. So while every student designed few buildings, 3 buildings roughly per student, at the end they shared the information in order to make the representation of the whole, to understand also they were working one next to the other one. So it was strictly necessary to interact between one and the other students, the left and right of the building, in order to have some solution that were not causing problem to the next one. So these are views of the block 22. This was a view inside the courtyard where you can see the way this street in this case could work. Here is also possible to see inside the courtyard another solution where the parking lot is not open to the sky, but there are little volumes to habit the cars. And this was the abaco we made not of the existing city but for the future city. We made a few drawings to show how windows, how cornices could be made with the simple use of bricks, typical windows and dormers for Dutch facade crenellation. And then these are proposals of some of the houses they designed following the layout of a typical Dutch house in the way you are entering and you are going to the main spaces, you go to even the small restroom at the entrance of the building. Everything that is following the typical layouts. And as you can see in the plan, there are possible solutions to keep the same plan, to reduce the cost of construction, while the internal condition of the building is one. The same building could offer the possibility to have a 3 different solution in facade, which is also diminishing more the costs of construction. These are the elevation proposed for these blocks. It's written also which are the buildings according to the plan that was given. And these are other proposals based on the same logic. As you can see, there is no one building that is similar to the other. Some of the houses, the more humble, are those that later on it was decided to be used as a social housing. As you can see in the plan, it's possible to identify what these facades are displayed. Also because the same house could be repeated in the same project far from the original one, in order to reduce even more the costs, but avoid the repetition of the same building one next to the other. As you can see, the plans are all studied with all the possible furniture. This was one of these corner buildings. As you can see, the same solution for the bricks was proposed for these houses, which were social housing in this case. These were other solutions for social housing. This was a way to give some character with a very simple details. This was for the accommodation of the place where the building turned. These were apartment that was planned to be organized like a casa in linea, like a longer facade instead of being the row house. In the corner, there are special buildings that are much more condo rather than row houses. Sometimes the buildings are hosting shops at the ground floor according to the dispositioning in the master plan. And then the project was presented in Rome. They came, the entrepreneur, very smart lady, and the representative of the municipality, and obviously the representative of the firm Kriya. And they were very happy. I was not thinking the project was going to have that success. They invited me to go to Helmond, to Eindhoven in the Netherlands 2 weeks later to make a presentation to the whole citizens. And they were so happy that all the houses designed by third-year students were sold out, and they became the model to complete the district. And these are the project of my students immediately after the construction. This was under construction. And I think it's quite unusual that the third-year students of the School of Architecture can have in their portfolio a built-up project. I think that is following the typical layouts. And as you can see in the plan, there are possible solutions to keep the same plan, to reduce the cost of construction, while the internal condition of the building is one. The same building could offer the possibility to have a 3 different solution in facade, which is also diminishing more the costs of construction. These are the elevation proposed for these blocks. It's written also which are the buildings according to the plan that was given. And these are other proposals based on the same logic. As you can see, there is no one building that is similar to the other. Some of the houses, the more humble, are those that later on it was decided to be used as a social housing. As you can see in the plan, it's possible to identify what is facade are displayed. Also because the same house could be repeated in the same project far from the original one, in order to reduce even more the costs, but avoid the repetition of the same building one next to the other. As you can see, the plans are all studied with all the possible furniture. This was one of these corner buildings. As you can see, the same solution for the bricks was proposed for these houses, which were social housing in this case. These were other solutions for social housing. This was a way to give some character with a very simple details. This was for the accommodation of the place for the building firm. These were apartment that was planned to be organized like a casa in linea, like a longer facade instead of being the row house. In the corner, there are special buildings that are much more condo rather than row houses. Sometimes the buildings are hosting shops at the ground floor according to the dispositioning in the master plan. And then the project was presented in Rome. They came, the entrepreneur, the smart lady, and the representative of the municipality, and obviously the representative of the firm Clear Cole. And they were very happy. I was not thinking the project was going to have that success. They invited me to go to Helmond, to Eindhoven in the Netherlands 2 weeks later to make a presentation to the whole citizens. And they were so happy that all the houses designed by third-year students were sold out, and they became the model to complete the district. And these are the projects of my students immediately after the construction. This was under construction. And I think it's quite unusual that the third-year students of the School of Architecture can have in their portfolio a built-up project.
We have assembled to learn, even those from the other streams, geographers, any question that comes to your mind. Professor is here, all for you. You can understand the stature of work at his, normal routine, and he's made time to be here with all of you, to contribute to your learning, experience exercise of yours will be very, very important. And if we can, compile your documentation and hand out something for the others to follow, it will be a great contribution. So you take your work on the side also seriously, and all of you have that caliber to do. Just believe and do it. Okay? So, a loud clap for the professor. Yeah.
Yes. Little out of context of this.
Sorry?
Little out of context of this.
Social housing districts, which are a disaster in terms of sociology, in terms of the economy, and in terms of the environment. And I'm bringing in this project, the project I'm going to show you are also showing how to make an urban design that is also a social design. And it is a place to create a series of spaces for gathering people. Because what we have lost in the 20th century urban design is the design of the public spaces. There is the subdivision of function with the zoning, and there is the scattered disposition of the function. Here I have the houses, there I have the shops, and there I have the schools. But then, the space in between, it is something that is not defined, because there is a great attention paid to vehicular traffic, but there is zero attention paid to pedestrian traffic. And when we are dealing with the pedestrian traffic recently, we have seen even in Rome, which is a city of piazza and fountains, there is no longer any idea, any attention paid to the design of spaces for gathering people. And so it was a competition a few years ago to make 100 new piazzas in the outskirts of Rome. But these piazze, in America they call plaza, are completely wrong. Because if we don't understand, and one of my lectures here will be to talk about urban sequences, how to read the existing city to design the future one, is mainly based on the fact that a piazza itself doesn't work. It could be beautiful or ugly, but a piazza where you need to take the helicopter to go there, visit the piazza and go away, it doesn't work. A piazza works when it's a part of a stroll. And this means that the stroll has to be designed. The way we can rhythm the walk from one space to another has to be designed. The piazza, the master plan cannot be made only on the in the respect of the private interest of the landlord that wants to build a building in his piece of land. There is some common good that has to be taken into consideration, which doesn't mean to have, because all built at the 20th century, which are the one I'm going to show Palermo. Important with the business is to talk with drawings without having any of what is of the economy. Something is to demonstrate you can have beauty and profits. You can have a public and where it's with a profit is losing anything. So the challenge is first, which are that what to do with money, because in the age of society, with the of COP28, 29, but also it is mandatory to reduce the energy and to be more efficiently. And the more we build after second this responsibilities. The way to make this more efficient, it is as incredible costs, and whatever that we have is a system of cost. It's something that is 20 years. It means that in 20 years you spend another €1 million, the same kind of interest, which means that it costs less if the that wants to move the planet condition in the replace everything that has been realized wrongly. when this will be done, this architectural project, it is possible to show how it's possible to practically see if it's possible to create spaces. Instead of a big thing, I'm going to show where if I avoid, I have this replaced, but I have this, I can first fill the when this is ready to move these people, and step I reconfigure with spaces. Yes.
There's a bus, main gate, go to the bus, the rule,
Presentation is still here.